Good morning, everybody, once again. Welcome to Development Standards under the difficult circumstances, and I just hope that the meeting will all stay connected and the meeting goes well. So we'll start off with apologies for absence.
We have two apologies, Convener, from Councillors Fotheringham and Moore. All other members are present. Right.
Declaration of interest. I'll go on first with the declaration of interest in agenda item number 8. I declare interest in agenda number 8 because the applicant is a fellow councillor, but I will be staying in my seat, as we can call it, as expression goes, and taking part in the application. Now, I think this might be taken as an en bloc, but anybody who wishes to raise their hand and not declaring it as en bloc on this application, do so.
We've got Councillor Miles raising his hand, Convener, and Councillor Cheap.
Oh, Councillor Miles.
Yes, Convener. I similarly would declare an interest in 8, but I'll take part. But in items 6 and 7, I also have to declare an interest as part of the Carnoustie Links Management Committee. And we have had negotiations with Sea Green, and I think in this instance it would be better if I did not take part. So I will not take part in items 6 or 7.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miles. Could we finish off with the agenda item number 8? We're taking that as an en bloc, except for Councillor Cheap. Do you wish to speak?
Not on item 8, Convener. I'm happy to agreement on block there as well.
Okay, right, fine, thank you.
Sorry, I do need to speak on putting a note of interest, however, on, as like Councillor Miles, on agenda items 6 and 7, particularly item 7. I'm as a trustee director of Carnoustie Golf Links. However, I will stay in the meeting and contribute, and there's nothing to be lost or gained by that.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest?
Other than the en bloc with you?
Sorry,
with the en bloc with you?
Okay, right, Councillor King, yes. Okay, with no other declarations of interest, we'll move on to agenda item 3, building warrants. The committee is asked to note that during the period 11th of May to the 9th of June 2020, a total of 39 building warrants and 7 amendments to warrants have been approved with an estimated cost of £1,712,841. Is that noted?
Indeed. Noted.
Agenda item number 4, delegated decisions. The committee is asked to note that during the period the 9th of May to the 6th of June 2020, a total of 47 planning applications have been approved and 3 refused under the scheme of delegation to the officers. Is that noted?
Noted.
Noted.
Agenda item 5, the minutes of the previous meeting, is those approved?
Approved.
Read.
Go on to agenda, the most important things on our meeting this morning, on to agenda item 6, planning application from Sea Green for the laying of the electricity line and all the works connected with that work. So could we have the slides, please? And I think we'll start.
Sorry to interrupt, Convener. Can I just confirm that Councillor Miles is going to leave the meeting, and if he just re-clicks the Zoom link, he'll be held in the lobby until we're finished, and then he'll be readmitted?
How do I do that?
Ali, are you able?
I just leave? I can't listen in without sound and comment.
No, you'll need to leave the meeting, Councillor Miles, just as you would in the chamber.
Okay, Alan, it's up to you for your presentation.
Sorry, Convener, can I just ask the IT host to confirm that Councillor Miles has left the meeting?
No, he's still there yet. He needs to click at the bottom.
I'm still trying to find out how to, but I'll get the other bit.
Bottom right and leave meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Can the IT host just confirm that he's gone?
Cannot see him.
Okay. Sorry, Alan.
Okay, Alan, pass it over to you now.
Thank you, Convener. Members. The presentation I'm about to do is for item 6 and item 7. 2 separate items, but one presentation that covers both, so I apologise in advance for the length of it. Both applications relate to the provision of underground electricity transmission cables. Planning permission in principle has been granted for this development for the electricity connection from Carnoustie through to Teeling substation. So the principle of this development, the principle of the route has been established by the grant of that planning permission in principle. And this is not an opportunity to revisit it. It's an opportunity to agree, approve, consider the detail that's been submitted. So the detail of the grid connection itself. Can we have the next slide, please, Ali? So just to give some context, the grid connection that we're looking at is to serve the Sea Green offshore wind farm. You can see on the slide before you the location of the wind farm identified in red off the Angus coast. Over 100 wind turbines that will provide power for around 1 million homes. And you can see the red line that comes from the wind farm to the Angus coast. So the landfall point for this wind farm is at Barrybudden, and that's been established through the permission that's been granted previously by council. Next slide, please, Ali. So the planning permission in principle that was approved by council in December 2016 provided for upgrade and extension to the substation at Teeling. You can see at the left-hand side of the screen, the green arrow identifies the Teeling substation, and that is currently in the process of being upgraded, extension being constructed, and that's around an £83 million investment project. Also on the slide, you'll see the blue and the red line that winds its way from the Teeling substation across to Carnoustie. Divided into blue and red to signify the two zones that are subject to the applications before you. The blue arrow to the red arrow shows zone 2, that's Teeling to Newbiggin Toll, and the red point to the other red arrow is from Newbiggin Toll across to the seafront at Carnoustie. Members will recall that in granting planning permission in principle, there was a very detailed environmental impact assessment that considered the major impacts associated with the proposal, and members determined that the impacts were acceptable subject to the mitigation measures set out in the environmental statement and subject to the conditions that members approved. Now, this is a national development. This is part of the project to deliver enhanced high voltage electricity transmission network. So this is something that's seen of national interest. Next slide, please, Ali. Now, whilst it's a national development, in very simplistic terms, what we're looking at are the formation of 3 underground trenches. You can see a typical section showing the trenches as they would go through agricultural land, around about 5.5 metres between the centres of each trench. Each trench will vary in depth depending upon the land it goes through, but typically in the region of around about 2 metres in depth. And you can see that each trench will contain 3 electricity transmission cables. And those are typically buried at a minimum depth of about 1.2 metres. They're covered with a tile, and there's an identification strip above that just to make it clear where the tiles actually sit. So 200mm ducts, each cable is located within a duct, and you can see the small circles just at the foot of the trenches there, and the cables sit within the ducts themselves. Next slide, please, Ali. The trenches are formed in 3 ways across the route. The first method is through open trenching, and there's the slide before you gives an example of how that takes place. We have various pieces of plant and equipment, but an excavator will dig the trench. The ducting is laid within the trench, and the trench is backfilled with soil that's present or that's been excavated. So we're looking at 3 trenches along the entire 19-kilometre route of the cable connection. Next slide, please, Ali. The second method that we're looking at for installation is through horizontal directional drilling. Again, just a typical slide that shows how that takes place. The main slide, the bottom right of that slide, shows a launch compound. So a compound is formed, a launch pit is formed. You just see that at the top of the compound area, and the drill enters the ground at that point, goes under the feature, and then reappears at the reception pit, which is in the compound at the top of the screen. And just in the bottom left, you see an example of a horizontal directional drill. So that gives you an indication of the type of equipment that's used for that particular process. Now, there are specific locations along the route where the terms of the planning permission in principle require horizontal directional drilling. That's specifically under a number of road crossings where it's crossing major roads. It's also proposed to be used to go under the rock armour at Carnoustie and to go under a number of water courses, but we'll see that as we move through the slides. Next image, please, Ali. A special treat for the farmers amongst you. This is the technique that will be used to cross the golf course, and the image shows a spider plough and a winch. So across the golf course, the plough will enter the ground, it will create a gap in the earth, and as part of an effectively continuous process, the ducting will be fed into the groove in the ground and backfilled. So that's a quicker and less invasive, less intrusive method of laying the ducting across the golf course, specifically identified to minimise impacts on the golf course itself. Next slide, please, Ali. So once the ducting is installed, the electricity cables are pulled through the ducting. The slide before you shows a number of locations, I think 12 across the route, where there will be junction boxes. So those are underground boxes where the cable will be joined along the route. The terms of the planning permission in principle require detail of all the above ground infrastructure associated with the proposal, and the bottom left image shows effectively what would be left following reinstatement of the works. At each junction box location, there are manhole covers, and where it goes through agricultural land, those would be fenced as appropriate. Also in the image at the bottom left, you can see a marker pole, just an example. They're quite common throughout Angus, associated with gas pipelines, where it identifies the location of the underground cable, and those appear at points where the cable route changes direction. So really, once the site is reinstated, what we'll have are a number of manhole covers along the cable route, and the small identification markers just to show the extent of the route. Next slide, please, Ali. So in a little bit more detail and focusing on the route that's approved, this is an image. We'll start at Carnoustie and work our way back to Teeling. So this is the item 7 zone. This is the second application that's before you. But this shows the landfall point, this shows the beach at Carnoustie, and members will recall we've approved the landing point on the south of the Carnoustie links. And you can see the red line, the extent of the application site as it goes from Carnoustie Beach across to Barry Station. Just point out that the extent of the works are limited to the Budden course. There are no works proposed on the championship course itself. The planning application site doesn't extend onto the championship course. So we're looking at the Budden course with the landing point at the beach itself. Next slide, please, Ali. Just in more detail, you can see the cable route itself running along the shore. It's underground as it reaches the beach. the horizontal directional drilling used just where we see the blue arrow to go through or under the rock armour, a compound or working area formed at that location, which you can see in the top left-hand side of the screen. So that's indicatively showing the type of equipment that would be present at this location whilst the drilling process is taking place, and that's the location where the drills themselves would be located to go under the rock armour. The red arrow just shows the route of the cable as it goes along the southern extent of the Budden course. The 3 trenches at that point formed through the ploughing technique that we saw earlier in the slides. Across the golf course, we're looking at a working period of around about 15 months, but different activities taking place at different periods. So, for example, the ploughing that's proposed to lay the cable ducting estimated to take around about 20 days, with a further 20 days or so allowed for restoration of that area. So 15 months in total across the golf course, but different activities at different times, so different impacts throughout that period. Next image, please, Ali. Just at the western end of the golf course, again, the point from the right-hand side of the screen to the red arrow laid through the ploughing technique that we've seen. The green arrow shows a construction compound that would be present. That's located on an area of hard standing associated with the golf course. The first red arrow, the red arrow in the middle of the screen, shows another area where horizontal directional drilling would be used. That goes under a site of special scientific interest. So Barry Links to the southwest is a site of special scientific interest, and to minimise impacts on that area, horizontal directional drilling is proposed to go under that area to minimise impacts. Just to confirm, Scottish Natural Heritage has confirmed it's satisfied with the proposals insofar as they affect all natural heritage interests along the cable route. The orange arrow that you see shows an area again of open trenching just across the Budden area. This is an area that's of less environmental sensitivity, and the open trenching method is the method that would be used along the majority of the route. The red arrow at the left-hand side of the screen, again, horizontal directional drilling, and that's going under the cycle path that runs from Carnoustie to Monifieth, and also under the main railway line. Again, Network Rail consulted on the application and have no objection to the proposal to the method of installation that's proposed at this particular point. Next slide, please, Ali. So just an aerial image that encapsulates what we've been speaking about. The blue arrow shows the landing point for the cable, the location where the working area would be. Yellow arrow shows the installation across the golf course itself. Now this is across the links. There is a core path that runs just to the south of the yellow arrow that you see there, and there will be disruption to access across the links during the construction process. But this is an experience that's not uncommon in Carnoustie. Access can be limited across the links for the Open Championship. Access to the Budden is limited because of the shooting at Barry Links. Access to the courses has been affected by the construction of the hotel and the Pro Centre. So an activity that's not unusual. It is for a fairly significant period, but there are extensive areas of links around the area to compensate that are available for recreational access. The red arrow, first red arrow that you see, as I say, is the horizontal directional drilling under the SSSI, under the designated heritage interest, open trenching, and then the final red arrow that we see is under the railway line. Next slide, please, Ali. So from Barry Station to Cotside Quarry, the first red arrow that you see shows the closest residential property. That's round about 30 metres from the cable route itself. It's not very clear on the slide, but you can perhaps just make out there's a small thin brown line, and that shows the haul road that would be associated with the proposal. And that's located to the west, so that's on the side that's furthest away from the residential property. We do have conditions attached to the planning permission in principle that seek to limit the noise emissions associated with the proposal, that limit the vibration associated with it. And our environmental health colleagues are satisfied that what's proposed should not give rise to unacceptable impacts on the closest residential properties. It will be apparent that the works are taking place. This is a fairly significant proposal, but at each point, the works are for a fairly limited period of time. You can imagine that the digging of the 3 trenches, the laying of the ducting, it's a fairly quick process. So we're looking at maybe between 2 and 4 months between each of the joint bays for works to take place. Just moving to the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the blue arrow, another construction compound, and we have horizontal directional drilling to go under the A930, which is the Barry bypass. So again, that was a requirement of the planning permission in principle that horizontal directional drilling be undertaken to go under that section of road. Next slide, please, Ali. So just an aerial image. This shows the closest property. You can see the red arrow pointing towards it. There is a ground floor window. It has a conservatory that has an open aspect to the west, so it will have views of the works as they take place. But certainly at the distance involved with the conditions, the protections that are provided by the conditions in the planning permission in principle, by virtue of the mitigation that's identified by the applicant through their environmental statement, satisfied that impacts on that property should not be unacceptable. Next slide, please, Ali. And again, just moving up to the red arrow showing the approximate location of the construction compound. At the top of the screen, you can see a residential property, blank gable facing towards the construction compound, and a separation distance in the region of, I think it's around about 60 metres. So again, at that type of distance, for the periods that we're talking about, impact should not be unacceptable. The blue arrow just shows the location of the horizontal directional drilling under the public road. Next slide, please, Ali. Moving along to the next section, this is from Cotside Quarry along to the Bud and Burn, going past Conkey's Corner, just to the south of the route that you see there. On this section, again, the open trenching technique is likely to be used. It's going through agricultural land. The applicant has provided information in relation to drainage, potential impacts on field drains, and our roads flooding colleagues are satisfied that there should be no unacceptable impacts associated with the proposal. The red arrow shows horizontal directional drilling going under the Bud and Burn, again to minimise impacts on the watercourse. And SEPA, again, consulted on both applications for the entire route and perfectly happy that there would be no unacceptable impacts associated with the works proposed. Next slide, please, Ali. So moving along, this is from the Bud and Burn up to the A92. The blue arrow in the middle of the screen shows a core path that runs from Ashbank up to Balhungy Farm. At this point, it would be a localised diversion of the core path. So as the cable approaches the core path, a diversion would be put in place, the core path would be crossed, reinstated, and the diversion route taken away. At the A92, under the dual carriageway, where the red arrow is, we have horizontal directional drilling, again to minimise impacts on the major road network. Next slide, please, Ali. A92 up to New Bigging Toll. You can see just the red arrow, again, another construction compound. You can see there are properties to the west of the construction compound, but again, a good separation distance, I think around about 50 metre separation distance to the construction compound. And if we have a look at the next slide, please, Ali. This just shows an aerial view and a street view image of the properties, good separation distance, and it's from the closest property, it's a carport that's facing towards the construction compound itself. So that's effectively the Zone 1 application. That's item 7 on the agenda. Quick run through that zone. Next slide, please, Ali. So moving on to Zone 2, this is the 10 kilometres from Newbigging Toll across to Teeling. Next slide, please, Ali. And the first stretch of that takes us from Newbigging Toll itself to the south of Drumsturdy Road. Quite a few residential properties in this area, but no objections from any of the properties that you see on the screen at the moment. And again, separation distances generally in the region of about 50 metres. The red arrow just shows a crossing point across another core path. Again, localised diversion as the cable route crosses the core path to minimise impacts on that route. Next slide, please, Ali. Again, in the vicinity of Drumsturdy Road, we have a construction compound just located to the south of Drumsturdy Road. A good distance, good separation distance to neighbouring residential properties. Again, no objections from the properties that you see at this location. Cable route itself at this point running through agricultural land, installed generally through the open trenching technique, and again, a good distance from neighbouring residential properties. Next slide, please, Ali. So just an aerial view of this location, red arrow showing the general location of the construction compound itself. The cable running from the middle of the screen in the left-hand side to the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Good distance from residential properties, agricultural area. You can see a combine working in one of the fields. So it's an area where there are short-term impacts associated with activities that take place, and there will be impacts associated with this proposal, but subject to the mitigation, the conditions in place, nothing that's considered unacceptable. Next slide, please, Ali. So from Kingenny running along to Kellis, the red arrow shows the location of the Murrows Burn. Horizontal directional drilling to go under the burn. We have Murrows Conservation Area located just to the north of that. But upon restoration of the cable trench, there are no meaningful impacts on the conservation area itself. No significant landscape impacts associated with an underground buried cable. And you saw that the manhole covers, the fencing that would remain above ground are not features that would be untypical within the agricultural landscape. Next slide, please, Ali. So just in the vicinity of Kellis, the red arrow shows the closest residential properties. No objection from the closest properties. The blue arrow shows the location of the sole objector to the application, and the concerns that have been raised relate to emissions from electromagnetic fields and disturbance from construction activities, particularly in relation to access. Next slide, please, Ali. So in terms of the closest properties, the blue arrow shows very approximately the cable route, and you can see the closest properties. Closest one is at the top left-hand side of the screen. You can see fairly substantial landscaping along the boundary of that property, which will provide some screening from the visual impacts associated with the construction itself. For other properties, for users of the roads in the area, the activity, the opening of the trench, the stripping of the soil will be something that's visible, but it's short term and ultimately will be restored. Next slide, please, Ali. So this shows the objector's property. The red arrow just shows the location of that property. As I say, there's been concerns raised regarding emissions from electromagnetic fields, but that issue was addressed at the time of the planning permission in principle. Committee attached a condition that required evidence to be provided that the the cable would be designed to comply with relevant emission standards. That information has been provided. It's been analysed on behalf of the council by an independent consultant, and the expected levels from the cable route are significantly below the recognised emission level. So the issue has been addressed through the planning permission in principle. It's not a significant issue in terms of the determination of this application. The other issue that's been raised is in relation to impacts on access to properties. The blue arrow that you see on the screen shows the general location of the pipeline, the cable connection corridor. And you can see it does cross the access to the properties. And that's something that will occur commonly along the access route. Next slide, please, Ali. This slide shows how that issue is going to be dealt with. So it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Starting at the top left with number 1, this shows the cable approaching the access road running from top to bottom on that slide. As the cable route approaches the road, you'll see on slide 2 that a localised diversion is put in place. So we have the loop coming off the access track. Slide 3 shows the cable route encroaching onto the recognised access, but the diversion being in place. The access track is restored, as you see in image 4, and at that point the diversion is taken away. So there will be some disruption, but that disruption is minimal, and it's mitigated by the proposed means of working. Next slide, please, Ali. So this slide shows the cable route in relation to Murrows Primary School, the primary school identified by the red arrow. We're looking at a distance in excess of 80 metres from the cable route itself to the school building, a distance in excess of 20 metres from the cable route to the closest part of the school grounds. The council's consultants who have looked at electromagnetic field emissions have indicated that the levels that would be experienced either in the school grounds or at the school itself are a fraction of the limits set by relevant standards. So very little impact associated with that on the school. And again, noise conditions specific to the school attached to the planning permission in principle. Next slide, please, Ali. Moving along the route, again, just a section that's through agricultural land, a number of houses within proximity of the cable route at this point, but no objections from any of those properties. Next slide, please, Ali. And the final section of the cable route shows the A90 trunk road. We have horizontal directional drilling to go under the trunk road. And at the left-hand side of the screen, you can see another blue arrow, and that's horizontal directional drilling to go through or under the Teeling burn as the site, as the cable route enters the substation at Teeling. The red arrow shows construction compound located at this location. There are a number of properties in proximity of it, and you get an aerial view of that just at the bottom left-hand side of the screen. So you can see there is some localised landscaping at that point that would provide some natural screening of the construction compound itself. And you'll notice that on both the applications before you, there are conditions that require precise details of the construction compound, precise details of the mitigation to be employed at each, to be provided for subsequent approval. But in terms of the area that you see, again, no objections from any third parties to the detail of the cable route. Transport Scotland has confirmed it has no objection to the works under the trunk road, and again, SEPA have confirmed no objection to the works in the vicinity of any watercourse along the cable route itself. Next slide, please, Ali. So we have the two items. We have the zone 2, which we've just looked at, which is item 6, the zone 1 stretch, item 7. Item 7, the stretch from Carnoustie to Newbiggin Toll. There are no objections to that application at all. For zone 2, we have the single objection which relates to the electromagnetic field emissions and disturbance. We have to be clear. This is a significant proposal. It's traversing 19 kilometres of Angus. There will be impacts associated with this. We knew there'd be impacts associated with it when we granted the planning permission in principle. We've accepted that. The principle of this has been established. The detail that we have before us demonstrates this can be done in a manner that doesn't give rise to unacceptable impacts. Final slide, please, Ali. So this is a national development. It's in the national interest. We're looking at a proposal. The overall proposal, the Sea Green proposal, has an investment value in the region of £3 billion. The cable route that we're looking at, the investment associated with that is around about £70 million. The works that are taking place at Teeling substation at the present time, about £83 million. This is a significant, this is a national development. It's in the national interest, generating renewable energy to power around about 1 million homes. You'll see that we have letters of support from Montrose Port, and those letters indicate that Montrose Port will provide the operation and maintenance base for the offshore wind turbines. This provides very real economic impacts, economic benefits to the local area through employment and investment. We've granted planning permission in principle. The principle of this development is established. We have conditions attached to that planning permission in principle that mitigate impacts. It's been subject of environmental impact assessment. The details before you demonstrate that the proposal can take place in an acceptable manner. It's compatible with the development plan, and both applications are recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for that very explicit presentation. Do we have any questions to Alan? Open up the questions to our officer.
Convener, Councillor Cheap wishes to ask a question.
Councillor Cheap.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, can I just say a well done to Mr. Hunter? That's probably a really clear presentation from start to finish, and I think has probably given us the clearest picture that certainly I'm aware of to allow people to get a basic understanding of everything here. So well done, Alan, on that. A couple of questions, and you'll have to excuse me if they have to be diverted to Sea Green later on this morning. But the first one I had was, and I don't have the paper in front of me because I'm looking at your screen, obviously, but the page 96 of our papers and paragraph 8.11 was talking about the hours of operation, and my concern here is on the drilling through where it becomes landward under the rock armour at Carnoustie and onto the Burden Coast and Gulf Links. And the bit I'm concerned about here is that in general the hours of operation are stated in the papers, but then it puts in a caveat saying extended working hours, including 24 hours per day operation for the drilling through the rock armour at the beach. Now, that gives me grave concerns about the noise if it's going to be 24-hour operation of drilling, because it doesn't matter for the fact that there's a few hundred metres. It's a pretty silent area at that time of evening, night and early morning. That sound's going to be heard into Carnoustie quite significantly. What comment have you got for that, and how has that been covered?
So thank you for that, Councillor. We have conditions attached to the planning permission in principle which set noise limits. So those noise limits apply irrespective of the hours that are being operated. I think there are specific conditions that relate to nighttime working attached to that. Like you, I don't have immediate access to the papers, but the conditions on the planning permission in principle do provide noise limits, and irrespective of the hours of operation, the applicant will be required to comply with those noise limits.
Okay, maybe that's something that I can ask the applicants as well, because although that's been passed back in 2017, I believe, I think after I came to council, the residents may have in Carnoustie may have a concern and won't have the knowledge that there's going to be 24-hour drilling down there. Bit of concern with that, so that remains. The second question I had is at the latter part of your presentation regarding Murrows School. I don't know if there's anybody else from Moneyfeith on the committee this morning, but you mentioned that I can understand why there's some concern here, but talking about the electromagnetic here, and you said a fraction of the acceptable levels. What fraction? 9/10. I'm not sure if 9/10 would be an acceptable fraction. So what fraction are we talking about here that will alleviate any concern parents of school children may have up there?
So ICNIRP, which is the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, I think, has set limits. In 1998, there was a limit set which was 100 microtesla. Now that was reviewed, I think, in 2010, where for specific frequency types, so this is alternating current that we're looking at here, a limit in the region of 200 microtesla was recommended. Now that's measured a metre above ground level, above the cable itself. The information provided by the applicant suggests that a metre above the cable, we're looking at an emission level of about 2.5 microtesla. Now that's directly above the cable. The council's consultants indicate within the school grounds, the level that we're looking at is about 0.17 microteslas. Within the building, it's about 0.05 microteslas. Now that's looking at a limit which is not a statutory limit, but is a guidance limit, either of 100 microtesla or 200 microtesla. Now, whichever of those levels you take, the emission level that we're looking at is a very, very small fraction of the figures that we're looking at.
Great, thanks for that clarification. That gives some comfort to it. Will there be opportunities to speak to Seagreen this morning?
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry.
there will be an opportunity to ask questions to the speaker after she's done her presentation. Councillor Cheap.
Thank you, Camille. That's all I have for Mr. Hunter. Thank you, Alan.
Right, did I see Councillor Dunno with your hand up?
Yes, convener. I had the same concerns that David Cheap had. I've actually been looking into it, and Mr. Hunter's talking about the ICNIRP is absolutely spot on there. That's the same notice as I had. The concerns I had was that the actual policy is 10 years old on this emissions, which is obviously a government policy that I think should actually be looked at. It's not relevant to today, but it is something that I'm going to actually put forward to our MSPs and MPs, because this is European guidelines, and obviously we're coming out of the EU, and I think it's something we should really look at. But my question would be, is this going to be monitored, the emissions? Is there a way of monitoring the emissions, or is once they're under the ground, can you not monitor them? I'm not quite sure about that.
So my understanding is it can be monitored. In terms of the planning permission that's before you, the issue has been dealt with through the planning permission in principle, and the applicant has provided the requisite evidence. So I don't believe it would be reasonable to attach any form of planning condition that required ongoing monitoring of the situation.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Next question, if there's another question.
Convener, Councillor Brace wishes to ask a question.
Councillor Brace.
Yes, thank you very much, Convener. Yes, that was an absolutely outstanding presentation from Mr. Hunter, I thought. So thank you very much. Actually, Councillors Cheap and Durno have asked the questions I was meaning to ask, and I'm satisfied with the answers given. I do have comments. Do you want them now?
No, we'll leave comments until later on, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Questions to Alan?
No other questions, convener.
No other questions, thank you. We'll move on now to the speaker, Fiona Campbell. Are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, well, you've got 10 minutes. Yes, I can hear you well, thank you. You have 10 minutes, and then stay there and we'll be questions from the committee, possibly.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Alan. Yeah, I agree with the councillors' comments there on the quality of that presentation. I think it covered our projects and our proposals really well. So just on the back of that, we're not proposing to cover the detail of the application any further. I think you've got all the information that you require, but of course if you have any clarifications on the technical elements, then please do ask us once we've run through this short presentation. Because we were aware that Alan was going to cover the application in detail, we've just prepared a short presentation, just 2 or 3 slides, outlining a bit of background about the Seagreen project, about where the cable sits in the wider project, and a wee bit about the economic benefits that Seagreen will bring to Angus, and a wee bit about legacy that we hope to leave with the community and in education. So if we could just move on to the first slide, please. Alan has covered a lot of this in detail, but this is just to re-emphasise the scale of the Seagreen project. Once we're in construction later on this year, Seagreen will be Scotland's largest infrastructure project and will result in the largest offshore wind farm within Scotland, with a capability of producing enough electricity to power 1 million homes throughout the country. And as Alan indicated, it's around about a £3 billion construction spend on the project. This particular part of the project that's before you, the cable route, which extends from the landfall at Carnoustie Beach up to Teeling substation, is an essential part of that project. You'll be aware that the Teeling substation is currently under construction. We've been under construction there for a few months, and that's set to continue on for some time yet. The offshore wind farm will start construction hopefully later this year, all being well. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. This is really the crux of these elements here that are the crux of the benefits of Seagreen, where we think we're able to bring economic benefit to Angus. You may have seen in the press in the last couple of days some positive news articles, particularly around Montrose Port. Montrose Port was identified and confirmed some months ago as being the operational hub of the wind farm. The current operational life of the wind farm is 25 years, so there'll be permanent jobs created there as the wind farm goes through construction and into operation. Our current estimate is 400 jobs being based in construction in Scotland, many of whom will be in Angus, and it's an obligation on our Tier 1 contractors to source locally based construction firms and place contracts within Angus in the first instance, and then on a sort of concentric basis out to Scotland and then to the UK and then further afield if required, if those skills and products can't be sourced within Angus in the Scottish market. And as part of that, we are estimating that the wider economic benefits to Scotland will be in the region of £1 billion, which, you know, this is obviously a significant economic boost to Angus and to Scotland in light of the current situation and as part of the wider renewable energy structure. Could we move on to the last slide, please? And here is a wee bit of information about where we would like Seagreen to have a lasting legacy in the Angus community in particular. So there are two separate funds have been established. One focuses on skills in the renewable energy sector, with £400,000 being dedicated to supporting STEM-based development, particularly in Angus. This is a particularly important element for the renewable energy industry and the long-term success of the industries, that skills and experiences developed to ensure that the industry is able to continue to succeed and to achieve net zero the targets. And the last thing there to mention is the Community Benefit Fund, which is has been set at £1.8 million. That will be distributed amongst the 6 community councils that are affected by the construction of the Seagreen onshore cable route. And the project has confirmed in the last few days that around about £30,000 of that fund will be able to be brought forward early and will be available immediately to be shared amongst the 6 community councils for they to use and distribute as they see fit. So our communications team will be in touch with the community councils in the next few days to discuss that, should we get a positive determination today. Just also for your information, to let you know who we have available to answer any questions you have today. So I am from the Fiona Campbell from the onshore consenting team. I have Liz Royal and Michael Walker, my colleagues in the onshore consenting team. I have Pauline Allison and Mark Timmins from the communications team. I have John Hillis from our land team, and Stephen Reid, who is one of the project engineers. So we're more than happy to answer any questions or anything that I've just run through now, or any of the detail of the application. Maybe it'd be worthwhile me just picking up just quickly on the questions by Councillor Cheap on the hours of operation. The HDD works at landfall when they are operation. The 24-hour operation will be kept to an absolute minimum. It will only be for a few days, very short, but it is required because of the nature of the works, just because of the length of the drills, and it's a particularly challenging piece of engineering that has to happen there. But we are bound, as Alan said, by the terms of the conditions of the PPP consent, whereby noise and vibration limits are set. We have agreed those with the council's environmental health officer, and those are the limits that apply both day and night. So we will, of course, adhere to those. But please feel free to ask us any further questions.
Great, right. Thank you, Fiona. Any questions to the applicant?
Convener, Councillor Duff wishes to speak.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, just a simple question, really. Once the cables are safely installed underground, what's the probability of any problems? Does that happen, or is that a pretty small thing? And if you have a problem underground, how is that fixed?
Stephen, do you want to take that question?
Sorry, we just appeared to have an issue with the mic. Can I just ask the IT host just to make sure the mic's unmuted?
Okay. Is that better now?
Yep.
Yep. Thanks for your question, Councillor Duff. Yes, it's something that we've obviously considered through the development of the project. In the first instance, we're using a reputable cable company that has been around for, I think, in the region of about 100 years. It's Nexans Norway that are supplying our cable. And this work, starts as soon as we've obviously placed the order. The manufacturing of the cable will take place. There'll be strict quality control overseen by Seagreen in the factory to ensure that the cables are obviously getting manufactured correctly in the way that it should be. Both checks undertaken independent by ourselves, and obviously Nexans, the cable supplier, will also be having quality control taking place there to minimise the risk of any issues during the production of the cables. Once the cables are ready to be brought to site, What we are doing first of all is we're using a ducted solution. So that obviously gives a further protection to the cables. They'll be encased in a metallic sheath, and with the type of cable that we're using, because it's all contained within, and it's an XLPE system. Apologies, I'm not the best person to speak to in electrical design, but that is the best sort of cable that is available on the market. So we're not expecting any issues during operation. The biggest risk to cables faulting, which is supported by information from the industry and statistics from other projects across the world, is third-party damage. That is the biggest reason that cables fault underground. Obviously above ground it can be weather that impacts on cables, but underground it is the third-party damage. As a result of that, we put in the mitigations in place that the cables will be buried at sufficient depth, to allow for ploughing, agricultural damage. As Alan had mentioned in his presentation, cable markers will be put out as well along the route, which will identify the location to obviously warn people if they are going to be excavating in and around the area. Consulting with landowners to make sure that they know that the cable's there and that information is passed down in terms of as-built records. And with all that in place, we're not expecting any issues with the cables when we install. There will be a requirement for us to undertake maintenance, but these will only take place at the joint base on the route, and we're expecting that to be undertaken maybe every 5 years through the life of the project. In the likely event that a fault is discovered, that can be a cause of damage to the sheath, which can take place when the cables are getting pulled through the ducts. And to mitigate against that, we'll also have quality processes in place, which will be ensuring there's enough lubrication when we're pulling the cables through the duct. We'll have additional pulling pits in between the transition joint bays, which will be temporary, and that allows for more lubrication to be put into the ducts to ensure the smooth profile of the cable coming through, to minimise any risk of potential foreign objects scratching the sheath of the cable. And just so to close out on that last point, if a fault was identified, then we are able to identify, I think, within 10% of the length of the cable, so within a sort of 16-metre area, we'd be able to identify the location of the fault on the cable, and as a result of that, we would obviously have to excavate that section and replace part of that damage on the sheath. But we're not expecting that. It's rare that happens, and that's supported by industry statistics.
Right, thank you. Any other questions to the applicant?
Convener, we've got Councillors Sturrock, Nicol, Cheap and Breeze.
There you. Councillor, who was first?
Sturrock.
Councillor Sturrock.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr. Reid. My point was exactly the same as that Councillor Duff has arranged. Given offshore industry with pigging and pipelines, etc., I do always knew there was problems to be had, but thank you for your answer, and I'm satisfied with what you've said. Thank you.
Yeah, right, thank you. Who's next now?
Councillor Nicol.
Councillor Nicol.
Good morning to you. If you were to increase the output from the field, from the turbines, would there be surplus capacity in this pipeline, for want of better words, the cable line, to take up the extra capacity?
I'll go ahead and answer that question. No, is the short answer. This cable is at full capacity and doesn't actually have the full capacity to take all of the consented offshore turbines as part of Seagreen Alpha and Bravo. We are investigating the possibility of taking the additional energy elsewhere, but this particular route is at capacity.
Who was next?
Convener, Councillor Cheap.
Councillor Cheap.
Thank you, Convener. Fiona, thanks for the answers you gave on my concern on the noise, particularly at the landward point. So I take your point that it's going to be kept to an absolute minimum, but I do have a concern with this, especially when you say it's unavoidable and it requires to be ongoing continually for periods of 24 hours until it's complete. It sounds like it's more economics than anything else, bearing in it's involved there. Bearing in mind that if that's going to happen, then can I get an assurity that that you will provide notice to us in advance of the expected dates when the drilling will be done and the length of time it should be expected to take, so we can alert the public if necessary to this disruption?
Yeah, of course, more than happy to make officers aware of works. In fact, we're bound to a construction timetable that is part of the PPP consent and now forms part of any matter specified approval as well. My colleague Stephen Reid might be able to give you some further background and assurance on the HDD works at landfall and the requirement for 24-hour working, if that would be helpful.
Yes, it would. Thanks. Yeah.
Yep, Stephen.
I think it's down to the nature of the drilling operation. It has to be continuous to get out to the end. You know, if you stop it, it causes problems with the drilling, because drilling is a very risky operation because you're really sort of drilling into the unknown. You can do as much ground investigation as you want, but you're still, if you're going to be drilling up to potentially a kilometre length, it has to be a continuous movement when you start drilling. So there will be, you know, it's a short-term period that you will have continuous movement. But probably just to add, you know, in terms of the noise monitoring, as we've mentioned before, you know, we've got the noise and vibration management plan that we've had to submit as part of the matter specified. We will have ecological clerk of works that will be on site. They'll effectively be sort of independently monitoring the works to ensure that the noise limits are being adhered to, and obviously highlighting any non-compliance. And it's also, you know, it's also been passed down to our contractors. You know, contractually, we have placed these limits on our contractors to comply with as well.
Okay. And you said, just to confirm this, you mentioned a matter of a few days. Is that, when you say a few days, what's your expectation?
I think my expectation is you're probably looking for about a week.
Okay. Okay, and just for one supplementary question on this, just for the avoidance of doubt, and it's just an opportunity to clear the air on this one, going back to the very start of all of this, because as I said, I joined the council just when this was being agreed, so it's kind of wet behind the ears. What was Seagreen's approach? Because you know we know there's been an agreement made with Christie Golf Links and the council, which is great news in all of this. But this could have all been avoided if the development had gone across the Ministry of Defence land at Ballybudden rather than taking the option of going across Christie Golf Links. Why didn't Seagreen pursue that further with the Ministry of Defence to avoid the need for the disruption to Christie Golf Links?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So the landfall and route were selected following a detailed site selection process. And the aim of that was to strike the appropriate balance between engineering feasibility and minimising impact subject to environmental impact assessment. So the route that we identified and received planning in principle for was the best route that we identified that struck that balance.
That doesn't answer my question, I'm afraid. The Ministry of Defence land has a road and is a largely barren site, no matter what people say. It's huge amount of hectares and could have easily been entered at the same spot and moved through the Ministry of Defence land, avoiding Christie Golf Links. I'm just asking why you didn't pursue that.
Well, it was also due to the fact that there is the Budden firing range there. There's only 2 of those type of ranges in the whole of UK. So it was to minimise impacts on that for national security reasons. But also there are European protected sites within that area. So you've got the Barry Links SAC there, and also directly adjacent to our landfall, you've got the Forth and Tay and Eden Estuary Special Protection Area for birds, and also the special area for conservation. So there was a big impetus on us to avoid impacts on those sites as much as we possibly could, and that was steer that we received from Scottish Natural Heritage at the time, and also the council in the scoping response.
Okay, I just want to make it noted that that this is a general question that everybody has asked, really, and I really think MOD's just clearly put pressure on and said no, as is usual. The fact on the argument on the environment and the special scientific interest, well, literally it's over the fence from the land that you actually are drilling, so I imagine the impact's going to be just as felt regardless of that. Birds don't measure distance in a few meters, etc. So I think it's a pretty weak argument, and I'm just wanting it, making it noted. We are where we are. It's going to go ahead regardless of all of that, but I just think this could have been something that could have been avoided generally for economic, commercial and environmental impact on Christie Golf Links.
Okay, Councillor Cheap, I think we've gone far enough along this line. Could we move on to our next speaker, please?
Convener Councillor Braze.
Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you. My question was in part answered when you answered Councillor Nicholl's question, but I would like a wee bit more information. You say that the capacity of the cable line is less than the capacity of the wind farm that you have permission for. Am I right in thinking that that's because you only want to direct so much of the output northwards to the Teeling distribution station?
Oh, it's actually more to do with the capacity of the substation and the substation that we were able to build, the extension. So there's a national grid substation that's being extended to accommodate the Seagreen proposal at Teeling, and then we have to build our own substation to sort of process the power. It's the national grid substation cannot be extended any further. There literally is just no more space. So that's the limitation. If we could take all the power from the wind farm to Teeling, then we would, but we just simply can't. There's just not the capacity on the grid network. So there's a very small proportion. We'll, as I say, we're investigating taking that to another substation elsewhere. But absolutely, we would do it all in one go if we could, but we simply can't. We're just hamstrung by the grid capacity in that area.
Yeah, it's just we certainly wouldn't want you to have to dig this all up again and put in bigger.
No, absolutely, that won't happen. Absolutely not.
I had another question too. I noted in the committee papers and in Mr. Hunter's presentation that we're told that any impact on agricultural land will be very short term. That's certainly not my experience of when water mains and pipelines and electric cables go through land. It can take generations to get it all sorted out. What sort of assurances can you give that proper attention will be paid to connecting up all the drains, etc.?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. Thanks very much for your question, Councillor Braze. Yeah, we have been working very closely with the landowners, particularly in the last 2 years of the project, before we've submitted the matter specified information. So, it's obviously a big thing that we take consideration of. From the drainage perspective, we're obviously going with the open cut trenching, which then allows us to see all the drains that are physically below the ground, because a lot of the drainage networks will have been in there for generations, that the current farmer may not know what is there. However, in advance of that, we've appointed, we had an independent consultant go out and speak to all the landowners to try and establish what they believe is in the ground. At this present time, we are out doing some trial investigations of the drainage as well, to basically verify what the landowners have been telling us. When we get onto site, we will have a drainage clerk of works that we appointed to oversee our contractor, so that to ensure that the drains are getting identified, getting recorded on site, and where drains have to be cut through, these are going to be reinstated to the existing or better condition. So that sort of closes off the drainage concerns in our opinion. In terms of soil management, as part of our project construction environmental management plan, we have a soil management plan, and that basically sets out how we're going to manage and excavate the soil across the route when we're doing the open cut trenching. So for instance, that may be separating out topsoil and subsoil, which will be undertaken. So they'll be separated out, because we have also, prior to that, we've undertaken a lot of testing as well to establish nutrients. We've had the Scottish Agricultural College have been out testing on the land holdings as well. So in terms of subsoils, we'll be keeping the soil local to where we excavate it from. We will not be transferring it across land holdings, because obviously there's the biosecurity concerns as well, which we're addressing with the landowners. We've had the Scottish Agricultural College out doing the appropriate testing for potato nematode, and trying to get the other one off the top of my head is the club root as well. So we're undertaking a lot of testing, and that will continue through the project. And that will continue through the project, and also in terms of biosecurity, before we sort of take access to land holdings, we've got a detailed biosecurity plan in place that will include disinfecting of vehicles, people's boots, no cross-contamination between land holdings. So we are taking that seriously.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, sticking to the plan is the crux of the issue. But thank you very much.
Any other questions?
No other questions, Convener.
Other questions? Okay, right, thank you. Now we'll move on to comments. We'll go back to as per agenda and ask for comments on agenda item 6. Any comments on agenda item 6, please?
Councillor Duff, Convener.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I mean, I think my comments were probably pretty general. I think I'd like to join my colleagues in thanking Mr. Hunter for a very full, comprehensive description of the project, which I think was very helpful, and I think answered a lot of the questions. I just wanted to welcome the development. I mean, obviously, as Mr. Hunter has said, it was agreed in principle in 2016, but it's clearly a huge engineering undertaking. We've heard the details today, a huge amount of money. I mean, I taught up about 150 million being spent in Angus, a lot of jobs in construction, and obviously the council declared a climate emergency some time ago, and this is green energy for a generation anyway to feed something like a million homes. So it's good news for the climate, good news for Scotland. I think it's good news for Angus, and being very parochial about it is good news for Montrose Port. So I'm very happy to welcome it.
Right, thank you. Any other comments?
Convener, we have Councillor Braze and Councillor Cheap.
Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Yes, this is a huge project, as has been said. It will bring massive economic and environmental benefits to Angus and to Scotland. The whole country is going to benefit from this. But a huge project that will, no doubt, cause a deal of inconvenience and disruption to quite a number of people while the project is underway and then completed. I would hope that Angus Council is going to put the resources in place to make sure that all the conditions that this planning committee have set will be properly enforced. Thank you.
Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Echo everybody's thoughts from an economic point of view. It's excellent for Angus. Understand Councillor Duff's own opinion on Montrose, of course, and the benefits there. It's from our own point of view locally. and over Carnoustie. What is very good news is the introduction of the ploughing technique rather than the excavation on the golf links. Also accessing the construction works via Barry Station with existing access roads, avoiding unnecessary disruption over the links from Carnoustie Golf Hotel to the onshore point of the cables, which needs to be avoided at all costs. I think overall there's no local formal objections being put into this, but there is still considerable concern locally, particularly due to loss of amenity, works noise, which I've raised again this morning, and commercial business interruption. And I suppose, again, going back, just the fact that all of this could have been avoided if the applicant had pushed the MOD more to permit this development on its largely barren land, rather than taking the path of least resistance and seek compulsory purchase orders over the commercially successful, hugely important Carnoustie Golf links. However, that said, we are where we are. We welcome the overall development, but we must require to monitor this. It's such a massive project. It has huge potential for interruption, as Councillor Brace has said. It's all very well plans being put in place, and the best plans, as they say, but we all make them and they go awry at times. And we really need to have very close monitoring on this, as we will locally here on the development. One last thing, one bit of good news, of course, the Community Benefit Fund, to acknowledge that to Sea Green is very welcome across the community councils. I do question just the fact of why it's all of these community councils. As far as I'm concerned, the impact of all of this is positively felt to Montrose, particularly. The impact is from Carnoustie up to Teeling, and it's these community councils which should be benefiting from the Community Benefits Fund. And I would just make a mention, because I think excluded from those community councils is Maniki and Newbiggin Council, which we've seen today. Newbiggin area is affected by this, and I would recommend that Maniki and Newbiggin are included in the list of community councils that will have access to the Community Benefits Fund, if that can be taken on board by Sea Green, please. And perhaps look again at the fund being directed primarily between Carnoustie and Teeling community councils. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Any other comments?
No other comments, Convener.
No. As we're dealing with agenda item 7, I'm happy to move this report with the conditions attached. The application before us today represents a huge investment to the amount of $3 billion over the whole scheme. And for Montrose Sport, the benefits are long-lasting with 25 years, although I think the report said 50 years seabed lease, and I'll bring a great deal of jobs to Montrose. So I'm not going to deliberate any more, and I'm happy to move this report. Is that agreed? Agreed. Therefore, application number 20/00120/MSC is conditionally approved. Move on to agenda item 7, comments on agenda item 7. Is there any comments?
What do you think?
Convener, Councillor Brace.
Councillor Brace?
No, sorry, his hand's gone.
Councillor Sturrock, is it?
No, there's no other comments, Convener.
Well, same as agenda item 7. I'm quite happy to move this report as it stands with conditional approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Therefore, report number 170/20 is conditionally approved. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Right, thank you. Move on to agenda item number 8.
Convener, can I just stop you there? Can I ask the IT host to readmit Councillor Miles to the meeting, please?
We'll sign off now, but just want to extend our thanks from the project team to Alan and his team in the plan department, and to the councillors for their time today. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Fiona. Okay, we've got Councillor Miles unmuted now.
Convener, he'll need to be readmitted to the meeting by the IT host.
Alistair, are you there?
He has been admitted, but he hasn't enabled his sound yet.
I think my colleague's just trying to get in touch with Councillor Miles to ask him to sort out the sound. Apologies, convener. We're just trying to readmit Councillor Miles now.
Yes. How long do we wait?
Could I maybe ask Ali if you could unmute Andrew Wilson? I think he's trying to sort out the issue for us. Oh, there he is.
Councillor Miles.
Councillor Miles, could you connect to the audio as well, please?
There he is. Sarah, we're okay to proceed now.
Lovely, thank you, Ali. Convener, that's us ready.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8 on our agenda, which is a listed building consent for an application at Bunbride House, Bunbride, Carnoustie. Main reason it's before us because it's a fellow councillor who is the applicant. But however, Alan, could you give us the slides, please?
Absolutely. Thank you again, convener. You'll be pleased to hear there are fewer slides for this one. This is a listed building consent application for alterations at the stables at Bunbride House. As you've indicated, the only reason this is before members is because the applicant is councillor. There are no third-party objections to the application. Next slide, please, Ali. Site itself is located just to the east of Carnoustie. The blue arrow identifies the stables building, which is located within the wooded policies of Bunbride House. Bunbride House sits just to the southeast of the stables building itself. The property is a Category B listed building, so it's identified as being of special architectural and historic interest. Next slide, please, Ali. Just a plan that shows the property. The blue arrow identifies the east elevation of the building, and it's this elevation where we see most of the alterations, predominantly alterations to windows and doors, some new openings formed, some existing openings altered. The elevation has been changed substantially in the past. It's been repaired with inappropriate brickwork, and some of that is being remedied by the works that we see before us. In addition, there is the provision of new flues within the building. The building has previously received permission for conversion to a number of residential units, and the flues will provide an extraction method for each of the properties itself. Next slide, please. So the elevations, the yellow circles identify the primary alterations to the building. The first elevation along the top, you can see a number of flues 3 new flues introduced into the roof of the building, existing flues already in situ, subject to previous permissions that have been granted. The slide below that shows a couple of patio style doors. Oops, back one please, Ali. The image below that shows patio doors that are being formed. The image below that, you can see in the roof space 2 additional conservation style roof lights, and also on that image you'll see red lines which identify other alterations that are taking place to the east elevation of the building. And the image at the bottom of the screen, again just showing a couple of alterations to other elevations of the building. Also some internal alterations proposed, but as we see from the next slide, please, Ali. The blue arrow identifies the stable property, and you'll see a number of years ago it was in a fairly poor state of repair. The roof had collapsed, so the interior of the building is now of very little historic interest. Principal interest associated with the building is the west elevation, which we'll see later on, and also its historic association with the Pandride House itself. Next slide, please, Ali. So this is just the east elevation of the property. This is the elevation where we see the most significant changes, the introduction of the additional Velux roof lights. At the left-hand side, you can see the works that are underway at the present time. Those are works that were approved by this committee, I think, in December last year. Members will recall this property has been before them in the past, and permission was granted for alterations to what was I think the coachman's cottage. So those works are underway. Other works are proposed to the elevation that you see before you. Next slide, please, Ali. This is just showing the west elevation of the property. You can see the crow-stepped gables, the curvilinear arch over the entrance to the courtyard, and these are really the historic features that are most significant to this property, and those are largely unaffected by the proposals that you see before you. What's before you has been subject to consultation with Historic Environment Scotland. No objection from HES to the application. Proposal doesn't have a significant adverse impact on the special interest of the listed building. Indeed, it's seen the positive reuse of a building which, as you've seen from the slides, until fairly recently was in a poor state of repair. So a welcome reuse of a listed building, something that complies with our development plan policy, and it's recommended for approval.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions to Alan?
Convener, no, it doesn't appear there's any questions.
Any comments?
Councillor Cheap wishes to make a comment.
Right, Councillor Cheap.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Just very briefly, I think paragraph 8.7 and 8.8 of the report says it all here. These buildings were left by the previous owners in very poor condition. And in fact, the buildings had been stripped. We didn't mention that, had been stripped and very unsafely stripped in places by thieves, leaving gas mains open and everything there. It was really quite appalling. The applicants have obviously re-roofed this, restored and brought these back into gainful use with historic elements reinstated, particularly the west elevation, as you've made observation to, Alan. And I think when complete, the provision will be 6 short-term holiday lets, which I think will be an excellent example of investment in Angus tourism. It's as simple as that.
You're right. Thank you, Councillor Cheap. Any other comments?
Councillor Brace, Convener.
Councillor Brace.
Yes, I'm very pleased to see this application. I think the best way to protect those old buildings is to bring them into productive use. So very pleased to see this. Thank you.
Agree with you entirely, Councillor Brace. Any other comments?
No other comments, Convener.
No, there's no other comments. I'm quite happy to move this application for approval. Is that agreed? For planning application 20/00/100/229 LBC is approved. And I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. At this point, I would just like to say thank you to staff at Angus Planning and Alan for bringing us the reports before us today. They've been so explicit and well done, and finishing in an hour and a half was way beyond my expectations. So Alan, thank you very much, and to the staff in the planning office, and also to Sea Green for bringing such an explicit agenda before us today.
Thanks, the convener.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and we'll close the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to say safe journey home.